Welcome to Movie Bounce with Mike and Harry, where we'll bounce from movie to movie.
From actor, writer, director, any which way.
Who knows where we'll bounce to next? Hi, everybody. It's Mike here.
Harry's here.
And we have 2 days left till Christmas. And
So now we're entering the end game, and we're talking about the last
Endgame.
Jedi.
Oh, damn it. I forgot. Wrong.
A different franchise, but yeah. So we've gone through. Gosh, we've gone through 7 movies now, and now we've only got 2 left.
Almost getting toward the end of the road. And we didn't cover Rogue One or Solo because they don't technically. We were just doing the trilogies. And I guess they don't register to us as Star Wars films.
But those movies will pop up, so don't worry.
Yeah, they'll come up at some point. We might bounce to them somehow in the future. But we're just doing the trilogies. That was the objective. So let's get right into it. I mean, where we left things off for the last episode is that, I was going to call it The Phantom Menace, but A Force Awakens did all that heavy lifting with these new characters. We've been introduced to them properly, some would say, questionably sometimes. But yeah, what were your expectations going into The Last Jedi, Harry?
So Force Awakens was done. We've established the characters. We had a movie that was somewhat similar to A New Hope, but again, perhaps all done in good faith to kind of lay the groundwork. I was excited because, in the back of my mind, I felt that this movie was most likely going to mirror Empire Strikes Back, which of course is certainly my favorite Star Wars movie. We got to know the characters.
What made you think that it was going to mirror Empire Strikes Back, though?
Oh, I just knew, because Attack of the Clones mirrored Empire Strikes Back.
Did it really? Oh,
yeah.
in the way that the arm was cut off.
Yeah, well, there was a bunch of callbacks, and I did not
mention... This seemed lighter than...
No, it still ended on a bit of a down note, and I did not mention this when we talked about the prequels, because this is too large of a conversation. But there's a theory out there on the internet, which I like because it's very interesting, but it talks about this ring theory of storytelling in which Lucas said they're going to mirror each other in reverse. So rather than like A New Hope mirroring a Phantom Menace, it's actually the opposite. Phantom Menace mirrors Return of the Jedi. I'm not going to get too much into that. But with that in mind, I definitely felt that the new sequel trilogy was going to have a lot of callbacks and reflections towards the original trilogy. I just had that in my gut.
Okay. I did feel that potentially that could be the case. I mean, you had to go darker at least. I felt that the Force Awakens was even though it had a moment where Han Solo got killed by his son, and that's a dark moment. We all knew that Harrison Ford wanted out, so you go, well, Harrison Ford's happy, so I feel like this is still not that dark.
As long as Harrison Ford is happy, then yeah.
He wanted out, so
sure.
He wanted to go down the route of Yoda. He probably wanted to be out before Yoda in Return of the Jedi, and he just lost it, and he was just still doing his time. So I felt like we had to go darker. You couldn't go lighter. You couldn't stay the same path. So it's just like, well, how dark are we going to go? What I loved was that the key thing I always look for is who's writing it, who's directing it. And, when they mapped this out, it was, of course, J.J. Abrams writing and directing the first one with the help from Lawrence Kasdan, who did Empire.
Right.
But I never really felt Lawrence Kasdan's imprint on Force Awakens. I felt that was more J.J. Because Lawrence Kasdan's the one that challenges the characters, really, gets things roughed up. But I guess that was him back in the 80s. Maybe things have just not, he didn't really add his style as much to that script. And he wasn't coming on board for this one. So it was Rian Johnson writing and directing this one. And then Colin Trevorrow would be doing the following, that would be the last chapter in this new trilogy. So that being said, I wasn't looking forward as much to Colin Trevorrow's film because I saw the Jurassic World movie and I wasn't too thrilled with that. But I did go into this movie a little bit more kind of hope because I've seen all of Rian Johnson's previous films, and they always worked, kind of played different notes with me, but at the end of each of those films, I ended up really enjoying them. So I was excited to see what he was going to bring to this film. But I gotta say, I didn't have much excitement in terms of the teasers and the trailers like we talked about with Force Awakens.
Yeah, so I actually didn't watch the trailer for this, as surprising as that sounds. I kind of went in cold. It's something that I mentioned in all these episodes. For me, I always will just have this intense love for Star Wars, but at the same time, I've kind of backed away a little bit. And I found that for me, that's what I need to do. It's almost like a heroin addict because I really love Star Wars so much. And I guess I'm just afraid that if I get too close to these movies, I might just get pulled so back into all of that, and I'll want to read the books and I want to read the comics and all that stuff. So I've tried to approach them at arm's length and just kind of take them as individual movies. And I feel like that's really been the best way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think for this one, I don't know what my approach to it was, because I know when I sat down in the theater, my priorities were just totally out of whack, mostly about popcorn. But we're going to get to that in a moment.
Oh, yeah, because that actually plays a pretty big role into us seeing this movie, as I recall.
Right, so before we get to that, I'm going to say I did watch the trailer to this movie, and I think the final trailer, once I saw that, I loved it. I thought it was one of the best trailers I've seen in quite some time. And it did give you that hint of how dark they were potentially going to go. And like I mentioned in the previous episode, I was like, I love the fact that The Force Awakens gave me this aftertaste of, the Darth. I was going to say Darth Maul. Kylo Ren is what I meant. Kylo Ren could really take things to 11 on a scale of 1 to 10 and really go, basically go even more evil than Darth Vader. And I was really looking forward to seeing where this movie would go, and that trailer kind of gave me some semblance that could be. That's giving a nice hint of what's to come.
And I really liked what Kylo Ren brought to the table, or Adam Driver did in A Force Awakens, because I love this kind of almost like impotent rage that he had in the movie, where he was always so angry. But so Darth Vader was, in A New Hope, Darth Vader was kind of disrespected, but he choked that guy out. He definitely asserted himself. Kylo Ren always seemed like he was on a leash in that movie, so I really liked that. I thought that was a very interesting way to couch a villain.
But once he was off that leash, once he killed Han Solo, that's it. Now he's off the chain, and that's where things really picked up. For me, where you go, he's committing to being this evil guy. So I was like, okay, now I can't wait to see where we go with this.
Well, where we go with this is The Last Jedi, and let's get into it. So,
let's start with the popcorn. Yeah, we got to talk about our experience.
Yeah.
So so it was a snowy day. I think it snowed the night before, or something like that.
It snowed. How much detail do you want to get?
No, we're not going to go into that much in the snow. We don't have to go into how many inches of snow, or maybe we should. No, I'm kidding. But we were on our way.
Wasn't this the Star Wars movie? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. Which was the Star Wars movie where you had to pull over so I could urinate on the side of the road?
This was that Star Wars movie.
Okay, well, alrighty. So the tension is building up. Bladders are full. Everyone's just so excited about this movie.
I came by with a car. We drove out to Long Island, which is we selected a theater that was 30 miles away, and we were running late. And
I would say, since we're getting through all the details, so my brother selected the theater and got tickets for everybody. So we were kind of, at his whim, which was fine because, it's a fine theater. But yeah.
Yeah. So basically, we had tickets that we had to get to a certain time. We had to get there at 7 p.m., I believe, or 6 p.m. It was 6 p.m. And we had 45 minutes to go. Yeah, it was pretty early. So we only had a short period of time to get there, and we hit traffic. And you had to pee alongside the road. And then we were running late.
Awesome memory, by the way.
We were running late, but we were getting there. But it was like, we're missing the trailers. We're going to be missing a lot of this, a good portion of the trailer. 15. We're going to come in 20 minutes past the start time.
And this is when you overshot, and we were going all the way towards Jones Beach.
No, that was Force Awakens.
That was Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
So that was another one.
I feel like with all of these movies, we were always running against the clock.
Yeah, exactly. So we like to do that. That's how we do it. We pick a theater far away, and we try to see if we can make it in time. While we were on our way, we knew we were going to be 20 minutes late. Park the car, go inside. I'm still like, hey, I'm going for the whole experience here. Luckily, there are no lines for the concession. I'm going to get my popcorn, and then I'm going to enjoy this film. So that's what I did. You got your seat earlier. I got in with my popcorn, and we had other friends there. We met up with everyone, your brother and all. And then movie starts. I miss a few minutes. I'm not sure what's going on, but we're all flying out there in space. And then I'm eating my popcorn. I'm like, this popcorn's pretty good. This movie, I don't know what's going on. I'm like now deflated. I'm like, okay, where are we going with this movie? My anticipation for the film and what I saw in that trailer just got washed away, and it was just like, oh, we're in one of these. We're flying around. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here. I could be falling asleep soon. I don't know. And that was basically the first few minutes of the movie for me.
I guess for me, and I've had an opportunity to kind of think more about this. The biggest disappointment was the movie was largely boring. There was a lot of scenes that I thought were cool and were definitely captivating. But the minute that I realized that the bulk of the movie was going to be about this slow chase through space, I was a little disappointed about that. Like, when you watch a movie and you don't know what to expect, but eventually the movie reveals itself to you and you start to understand what it is and what it's not. And I guess once I realized like this was going to be like the bulk of the story, I was a little disappointed.
Well, I'll say this: as we're going through the movie, the experience, as I hinted at, like in the first 5 minutes, I was kind of like, where are we going with this? I wasn't reinforced. I didn't have much confidence in terms of where we were going either. And then once the film, you're introduced to some new characters, and now you're being reintroduced to Finn, and I was like, oh great, I want to see where we're going with his journey. And then I think the thing that really perked me up, where it got my attention, was when you picked up the story between Rey and Luke. And that's when I was like, oh okay, I want to see what the hell's going on with Luke. We didn't talk about this in the last episode, but what a great note to end on with Force Awakens, with that last image of Luke. I mean, I kind of griped in an earlier episode in terms of the performance from Mark Hamill in the role of Luke in A New Hope, but he didn't say a word at the end of The Force Awakens, and that performance just like, boo, it was great. It couldn't end on a better note, and that's where I was like, well, now he's going to have to speak, so where are we going to go with this? So I didn't, and I got an idea from the trailer that, things weren't looking too good. It wasn't very optimistic about the way things are going to go. And then they start showing you what he's been up to. They don't use it in words. They instead of saying things like they did in Force Awakens, Luke's doing, you see what he's doing on his day-to-day as Rey observes him. And I was like, okay, all right, this is
interesting. Which, by the way, involves him milking that giant beast and kind of just drinking it fresh from the udder.
And I enjoyed that.
I love that. That was great. The best scene in the entire movie.
Hamill commits to that little wink kind of thing.
It was so
I loved
good.
that. And then, you hear the go away, and then Chewie comes back. And I love that as soon as Chewie comes back, as Luke's voice seems to have gone, there's such a distance in terms of how he sounds from Return of the Jedi to now. That's gone. But as soon as Chewie shows up, you hear that voice kind of go, Chewie, where are you? That voice that you're familiar with. And I'm like, ooh, that struck a nice note there for me. That worked perfectly. You didn't have to do an absurd over the top callback. That just worked brilliantly. I love that. And then you got a glimpse.
There was nuance to that. I would definitely say
and that's all Mark Hamill. So, and everything else, and of course Rey, they're not, obviously I did like the fact that they weren't like, hey, welcome, here's my island, all this stuff, so I liked the relationship between Luke and Rey. Again, I kind of had a little bit of a problem with Daisy Ridley's performance with this character, because then eventually when Luke begins to train her, he's like, do you know the Force? And she's like, yes, it's the thing where people do floating and stuff. And it just looks like she's reading off a blackboard. And then you're getting towards what they're doing with Finn's character on Canto Bight. Not a fan. That's where I am kind of going, okay, where are we going with this? We're throwing some humor in. Now we're sending another message here as well. I get it.
I was really disappointed with that because...
But aren't we all familiar with that? They've done that in the prequels. I when I even saw that, I'm like, oh, here we go. We got to go down something like this. Didn't you feel that? Familiar?
Well, I guess...
familiar going down the path that you knew wasn't going to add up to much?
I was disappointed because, again, where I come to Star Wars, one of the things that I want a lot of cool stuff to see. And then if you're telling me that the majority of this movie is going to take place on this fleet that's slowly trying to escape, that seems a little disappointing. They do take us out of that. So Finn and Rose go to Canto Blight. And it's this casino planet, and that could kind of be cool, and they show you some aliens, and they give you this kind of just quick montage of stuff, but it doesn't necessarily cash in on that. You don't get to see more than just that. It's all window dressing, And that was kind of disappointing to me. And then also, like, they definitely used that to develop Finn and Rose's characters a bit. But, like,
Right.
I liked them both, and I wanted more from them. And I wanted them to have more of an adventure. I mean, they certainly had an adventure, but it
Well,
wasn't
yeah, what more
enough
of an
for me.
adventure are you looking for? I mean, they kind of like through this journey, they are on an adventure together through till the end.
It's just such a short kind of. I felt a little. I felt robbed. I felt they
I,
could have perhaps done more with that. Like I wanted them to kind of go out there and I don't know, because then they get betrayed and stuff. It just seemed a little deflated.
More familiar territory. Like this is their
Sure,
past that we
and
went on
yeah,
down the prequels. You
I
know
think
that
that's
when they're doing the
fair.
clone thing, where everyone's
Right.
like, all right, we're having this battle. There's action going on, and you get the message on where they're headed, but it doesn't add up to a lot. So it's just like, all right, I took it with it comes with the territory. Yeah, I
Well,
didn't
yeah,
really see it.
that's
I wasn't expecting a huge payoff from that. And even though it didn't amount to much in the grand scheme of things, it was this little journey that they went on. And yeah, when I rewatch it, I don't really spend too much time on that scene. I kind of forward that through because I know, I feel similar to what you're saying, but I don't get that disappointed about it because I'm like, this is Star Wars. This happens most of the time.
No, you're
So,
right. But so they introduce new characters. So they introduce Rose, and
right.
then it's you expect them to do a little bit more. Like she could have.
Do you? Because I have
been-
no expectations. Because I have nothing. I'm just like, my thing is just like, I love Finn's character and like challenge him any way you want. I'm in and even with this role, like I love it even when he's in that casino and he's just like soaking up the whole. Like I'm all about that. Even though
Right.
I'm not too confident in where we're headed with this, still that's working on me. It's mildly entertaining. It's mildly entertaining, but I'm still like, all right, I'm here, man. You got my attention. But where are we going with it?
Well, they don't really go towards much with it.
Well,
And then
yeah,
you've got-
and
but
Benicio del Toro shows up, and I'm actually,
Yeah.
you'd think I'd be excited, but I'm more like, what? No, really, we're introducing a new character here, and he's playing this kind of character. Really, where are we headed with this?
he did a good job, but the whole point was to kind of make this pithy statement about how both sides aren't necessarily good, and
Right.
that wasn't necessary to make in this particular movie because okay, I get that, and it's an insightful
Why not? Why
point.
not explore that?
Because they didn't really explore it. He just says it, and then that's it. Like then once he's gone, and then the movie continues on the path that it originally went on. It was a weird detour. I think that's a cool statement to make, and I would love to explore that in the Star Wars universe. But they don't really like.
But I
it's
actually
a-
kind of like that because it's also how John Boyega's playing the character. He's like he's going along with it. He's trusting in Benicio del Toro's character, but then that trust is betrayed. I actually really like that as a challenge for his character, and that could have led to his death.
But that's fine. But they did that in Empire, and Lando betrays them, and they kept it simple. But the whole point that Benicio del Toro was trying to make was that he sells weapons to this side and that side, and the resistance is no worse than the New Order and blah blah blah. But why was that necessary? Because they didn't necessarily follow through on that sentiment. So it's there for like a second, and it hangs out like a fart in the movie, and then it's like, okay, well, we're done. We're going back, and now we're gonna have this huge battle, and we're never going to consider that again. Finn doesn't go back and start to question the methods of the resistance. He completely shrugs that lesson off. It's so forgettable.
I don't think that. I don't think it is forgettable. I think it was actually one of the moments of the film that is more memorable. But it's like, how much further do you want to go with that? I like the fact that it's like, nope, that was its all small little bubble, as you said, or you said fart. I like the fact that they just kind of like did that. It could lead to their death. But, and that's kind of, it just caps off right there. Hey, I would have liked that they did that a few other times within the film. You could have done like little Tarantino kind of like little stories there kind of going on there. That would have been great.
I'm sorry. The logical conclusion of that scene is that Finn and Rose go back and they start to question Leia. Like, what are you doing? Like, are you sure? Like, we found out that you're buying all this illegal stuff. Like, what's going on? And then, like, you could have done more with that, and they just chose not to. So it's there to kind of for you to ruminate on for about 5 seconds. And then it's like, well, we're not, don't worry about it. Like, this isn't going to be a big deal. Like, we're going to leave this all behind.
When you said going back to later, you meant in this movie, not in the following movie, right?
Right. Like, in other words, if they wanted to take that path down its logical conclusion, it
Yeah,
could
you
have
didn't need to
actually
necessarily always commit to that path.
Well,
I mean,
it could
like,
have created a very interesting story. Like, it could have changed the direction of the rest of
could
the
have,
story.
but you didn't have to because they had so much more to deal with. And I'm glad that they focused on everything else that they did within the story rather than going down that path. I think it served its purpose for what it was. I actually like that part. And then we're done with Benicio del Toro. So that worked with me. It didn't work for you. What else? What's the other thing? What I really did like, because I go, whoa, now you're perking me up a little bit, is this whole kind of thing where Leia sees Kylo Ren, and they're having this kind of like he can see her, but he can't see her surroundings, and they're having these conversations. I actually really I really like that. That was something we really didn't see before within any of these episodes within the trilogy, and that's where you're really thinking outside the box, and that really worked. And helping create that dynamic between Rey and Kylo stronger there.
So I'm sorry. So did you mean to say Rey from the beginning? So he's communicating with Rey.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
While she's with
right.
Luke.
Right.
And then when she's in her quarters or whatever. But the
Right.
thing is, and then that communication there, that I think really works. That's another great addition to the film. That's something that they did follow through on within the connection of those two characters. What I was missing within Rey's character within the first movie, within Force Awakens, where I wasn't totally on board, I am now on board with her character at this point, and I think this is where Daisy Ridley's her performance is actually at its strongest. So I really like what they did there. They had a little bit of mystery there too within some things, because she's trying to figure out where she came from, who her parents are, and that's working. I think just both their performances, Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley's character, her performance is really working well. And then when you got Luke coming into the mix, like that parent who's got to split the kids up, that works really well. So it's firing on all these cylinders here. It's something new. It's refreshing.
Yeah, I did like that kind of connection that Kylo Ren and Rey have, because also they're both they're still young, and like their training with the Force has been kind of slipshod. So I like that. So they're kind of like, they have that bond together where it's like, well, like, I'm not really sure. Like I'm learning this and you're learning that, and like, so they are connected over that aspect of it. So I did like that, and I thought that was unique, because I also like that idea that you have this villain who's not necessarily completely overtaken by evil like a Darth Vader was in at least certainly the first.
But see, did you feel? I kind of felt like maybe he really is. Like I that's just myself. I was just like, he could
I
take
always
this.
got the sense from Kylo Ren that he was kind of like a whiny kid who was like, he still wasn't on a particularly set path.
See, I felt like you went too far down that dark path, but you still felt like, maybe if you looked at, like, you knew the arc of these trilogies, you go, oh, well, they got to bring him back, so they're not going to, I'm like, no, they could probably have him go full tilt.
Oh, yeah, well, there's a lot of potential there, but I think he had this conflict, which I like that they were conveying, and in this movie, they really went for it and really showed that.
There were those beats where he was just kind of like providing empathy for her and her situation, but you still felt the gears kind of turning there. But it's where here's the thing. You brought this up a few moments ago. It's just like, if we were to look at these movies as individual movies, so far at this stage along this journey as we're watching it, I'm going, if this movie was not called Star Wars, if it was called like Treasure Planet, and it was these characters, I'd be like, this is a good movie so far. Again, it took a while to get going, but I don't see this in many other science fiction movies as much. So I'm like, this is working. I like how everything's more, I like the route we're on at this point.
So I would actually agree with you. I would say at this point in the movie, it's not 100% working on me, and I am finding it slightly boring, but I would agree with you. Like, I think
we're boring. I mentioned the boring parts that I found, but I'm like, with what we're discussing now, I don't find any of this boring.
Well, because we're actually leaving out a lot of stuff, right?
I mean, that could be it.
Before I get to that, so I will say that the movie is working well. Things are firing well. As a Star Wars movie, it's certainly disappointing me, at least. The thing that we're not talking about, which again, I mentioned in the beginning, so the core of this movie, the main driver of the story is that the Resistance fleet is slowly trying to escape the New Order fleet, and there's this whole situation where Laura Dern, who I absolutely love, is playing Vice Admiral Holdo, and she has a plan, and she's not sharing it with Poe, played by Oscar Isaac.
Right.
And there's the thing, like I really liked Admiral Holdo as a character, and what I liked with this
My
movie,
problem with her character is that, like, I just felt like we're getting to the point where we're introducing all these. We introduced Rose. We introduced, Benicio del Toro's character. We introduced her. It just seemed like too many characters we're introducing, and I'm going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Are you going to commit to establishing these characters that haven't been distinct? And I didn't know where they're going to go with this, and we've seen what they've done with other characters like this in the other films. So I did not have much confidence in this character, and it took me a little while to warm up to her.
and that's fair to say because it is done at the expense of other characters. So
Right.
So
and screen time, and at the expense of other characters' screen time.
No, you're right. So I really liked Poe in A New Hope, and I wanted to see more of him. But what I see in this movie is this guy he's pretty awful. Like he's questioning Vice Admiral Holdo, and I think we're supposed to find that commendable because he's like, he wants to stir mutiny, and it's like, well, we're going to question her authority and blah blah blah. But then if you look at it on the other hand, it's like, well, she's the vice admiral, like she should know what she's doing, and she doesn't owe an explanation to this dude who's like, 5 titles below her.
Right.
But what I liked about that, it was like in the original trilogy and a lot of movies generally is, when you have a resistance and you have a rebellion, for the most part, everyone's rah, 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 we're all together, we're not questioning each other. So at least that was fresh, that there suddenly was kind of this infighting. But I don't think it was necessary. Like, I felt like it was like, oh my God, so now we're doing this. This is how you're going to spend my time with Poe. Instead of developing his character and making me like him, you're actually making him kind of hate him. Because he's being petulant and annoying, and now I feel like we're dragging the movie down with all of his nonsense.
That didn't bother me as much. I mean, I know I can imagine it did to a lot of people, but I'm like, all right, fine. Like, that's he has his objectives. He can screw up. He can fail. That failure can cost lives. That if that's the path they're going to go down, I'm like, all right.
But they don't go down that path. It's very superficial.
If I ask myself, if I went into this movie with expectations like, oh, I really want them to explore Poe's character. If I really had, I bought the action figures. If I was a kid and I bought the action figures, I don't see, oh man, I wanted to be a savior. Well, this movie's going to disappoint me. But I hear you. If that didn't work for you, I get it.
I guess I just wanted to see more from him. Like, I liked Laura Dern's character. I thought she was really cool. Like, I love what she did at the end, and it's one of those scenes that I think is very memorable about the movie, which is very cool, where she hyperdrive.
That's amazing. Can I say this is that
cool.
that was something within and this is just rare. This is one of the things I love about this movie. But when we saw this in that theater, and again, I'm still kind of like, I could have taken a nap in the first quarter of this movie. But then that scene happens when she goes into hyperdrive, as you said. And that is all silent. And just the way they did it. And you remember, you're in the theater with me. You heard the people in the front row go, holy shit. That was like an experience I rarely had in the theater. Like, we're talking about only a handful of times where something happened that just stunned the audience. That just was you didn't see it coming. It was ballsy, it was stunning. And definitely didn't see this much in other franchises. Where I got chills down my spine. Where I was like, wow. Like, if I was bored to begin with, and certain other things are perking my interest, now you've got me. I'm like, whoa. Like, I did not go into this movie expecting that. I did not go into any of the prequels or any of these other films or even other franchises expecting that. We're talking about what's difficult to achieve in franchises. Boom, they hit it right out of the park with that scene. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the mythology within this, so I know that, and I've heard this afterwards because people were complaining, and we can get into it, like, once you introduce that idea, well, then the whole place is going to be full of kamikazes. I'm like, whatever, I don't care. That was amazing.
Yeah,
that moment, you can't take that away from me. That isn't a theatrical experience in a theater that's not that great, but is going to be memorable. It's one of the top memorable experiences I've had in a theater.
I don't think so. Okay. So, do you mind if I get super Star Wars nerdy into this?
You can, because I know I'm not, but definitely, I mean, it's not going to change my point of view either, because it can't take that away. But
it agrees with your point of view.
Okay.
So you would not have a whole, fleet of kamikazes because, for the most part, generally speaking, I would say that any starship that has the capability to do that amount of damage using the hyperspace, it would be so costly you wouldn't sacrifice a ship for that attack. like, the Millennium Falcon is pretty small and it goes through hyperspace, right?
Right.
Or an X-Wing can do that. It's tiny. Like, the best that it can do is maybe knock off, like, one particular part of, like, a spaceship, which I would say, like, a proton torpedo could do. And nerd rant.
Okay. I mean, fine, but,
Like, you wouldn't see it all the time. It is meant to be a very, like, memorable, like, specific, jaw-dropping moment. And it is. It
it's the
absolutely
execution. Like, that was bigger to me than the Death Star blowing up. Like,
It was way cooler.
You surpassed
way
the Death
cooler.
Star blowing up. How the hell did you do that? And it did it. And I was just like, whoa.
Because, again,
and
because...
just the sound where it goes, boom, like, oh.
We talk a bit about stakes in various episodes within Star Wars and without. The stakes became more personal. She had everyone's got to get off the ship. I'm doing this. It becomes more personal.
Right.
There's a certain intimacy with Luke blowing up the Death Star, but you're so removed from that act. It's something that happens.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have enough time to think about, well, who's on the Death Star? Like,
Yeah, like there are probably janitors there that didn't
exactly. No, totally. Like, so that's the thing. It's like here, it's totally, it's Holdo. It's just her. She made this decision. Yeah. I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to do this particular act. I can't tell anyone I'm doing it because it's going to compromise the plan. Like, there's such intimacy with this that it, you don't see when you blow up a Death Star.
It changed my whole opinion when I rewatched the film of her character. Like I said, I wasn't totally on board. It took me a while, but now I'm like, oh man, I really totally changed my view of her, and I really like the character now when I rewatched it. And I think Laura Dern plays that character beautifully. And so that's just me. And again, I get why people wouldn't like it, but man, what an experience that was watching that for the first time.
Right.
And there's also another thing where I did go back to see it in Dolby Atmos Theater on 42nd Street, and it just wasn't the same as the first time, man. It was good, but it just wasn't. And I still, when I rewatched it on Blu-ray, I'm like, and it's still great. It's just like nothing beats that first time when you discover that. When you're like, holy crap. That was amazing. So, and that's the other thing is like we also didn't bring up to speed what led up to it because the film is weaving through all these other threads. Now, let me bring up the negative before we get to the positive. Is that movie entertain me, bring me what you're going to bring me, and if I was, like I said, if I was really rooting for Poe, the film's not quite doing it at this point for me. Like you said, you brought up the bickering and how bratty he is. Same thing with Finn. Finn's going down a different path, and now you are on his side. You're hoping he's going to get out of this pickle he's in. So you're like, okay, but where are we going to go here? So okay, you're still kind of on board more Finn than Poe, at least from my perspective. And then, but you're totally, because the movie's totally investing in the Rey storyline with Kylo Ren. And then when Kylo Ren brings her in to see Snoke, there's that scene. And we are all, as we talked about in the last episode, we know where this route's going to go. We've seen this before. So I guess they're going to go with Rey's going to be held captive for the rest of this movie. They're going to try to torture her, and then it's going to lead to some battle at the end. But what does the film do? Doesn't do that. It goes down a different path. And we just talked about the Holdo maneuver, and then you have the scene where Kylo does turn on Snoke. And you see the turn. Boom, the lightsaber goes through Snoke. You're like, you can't believe it. Like, what? Did that just happen? You defeated the ultimate baddie already? And like in a split second, my mind, I'm going, well, where the hell are we going to go with the story then? But so all this shit's happening. And like, I can't even, this me, who I'm used to all these familiar beats, is going, what the hell? Where the hell are we going to go now? Like, but then you see that scene that's like where the lightsaber goes and Rey catches it. And then the score kicks in. You're like, whoa, I'm getting more chills down my spine. And then that look between Kylo Ren and Rey, as they got to now fight the other baddies surrounding Snoke, his guys, and just how everything kind of comes to the surface, the score, their performances, and then the turn where you see Kylo Ren's hair just swoop aside as they back to back fighting these guys. Like you provided me with one moment with Laura Dern. Now you got this. Like, whoa, like. And I'm like, did not expect this. This is like, poof, what another great moment within this film that I haven't gotten in a long time within the franchise.
The scene itself is really great, and I liked watching it a lot. Like, the choreography is great, the atmosphere, the color, everything comes together really well. And it's cool. And look, again, if we're evaluating these movies with two criteria, it makes for a really great movie. It doesn't make for a really good Star Wars movie because, as you said, I also felt, what are we going to do in the next movie? And I almost feel, and I don't say this to be provocative, I felt like it was
What does a Star Wars movie even mean after we've seen the movies we've seen?
Well, I'm just that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't even know what that is at this point. The reason why I like to agree with you when you say that, but I go, what the hell does that even mean? We sat through Attack of the Clones. How is that a Star Wars movie? How is Return of the Jedi a Star Wars movie? Like, I don't even know what that means.
No, I think you're right. I think the goalposts have moved a little bit, but at least you expect this this story building, and you introduce Snoke, and you expect to at least, you don't need to know his backstory, but you at least expect a particular resolution with him. And then what I want to say
I
is,
didn't care about his character. I knew we had to hit those beats of them establishing him. I'm like, there's not enough that they built up with his character. What mystery is there?
I think that's fine, but again, like I think also you have to look at that these are Star Wars movies, so there are people who come in expecting a particular
fair enough
pace, and I think if you dismiss that, I think that's being a little unfair because these movies live or die on the fandom. And I would actually say that killing Snoke was a bit of a selfish move. It's so cool for that movie, and like I love that they did that. But then you also have to think about like the poor schmuck who has to then write and direct the third movie now that they don't have this guy anymore and they can't resolve that.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Foreshadowing, it left them to make very poor choices in the final movie.
Yeah, well, that's what they did afterwards, and they couldn't handle it, and we're going to get to that. But the thing is, what if, and I'm not a Marvel fan, what if, and you knew how long they were teasing Thanos, if there was a Marvel movie, and you know Kevin Feige would never go down this path, it was, maybe say it was Infinity War, and you see Thanos, okay, he's on a throne, very similar to this scene, Thor's there, and then you think Thor's going to die. Thor's basically in the role of Rey. Thor's hammer goes right through, somehow kills Thanos right there. Now, I know the fans would be like, oh, you can't do that to Thanos. But as a viewer, I'd be like, holy crap, what did they just do? So I'm just saying that, giving a comparison to the fact that it's the idea in terms of the execution of it that really worked for me, where I don't have the context of the backstory, the investment, the characters, what it meant in the overall lore and all that. I don't care about that as much. But I'm just there for the journey, where even if they did that to Thanos, I would probably be like, man, that's freaking awesome. Whereas so many other people would be outraged, as they were here.
I get what you're saying, but again, so Star Wars, like I don't even want to necessarily take the Marvel route, but both of those movies, Star Wars and Marvel, had one more movie to finish the story. So to kill Thanos in Infinity War and to kill Snoke in Last Jedi is the cinematic equivalent of premature ejaculation. Like you're blowing your load ahead of time. And maybe that's fine, but then you better like over deliver in the final installments in order to compensate for what you chose to do.
So here's the thing. You're right. And even like I said, in that moment, my brain raced when you got Snoke in half. I'm like, well, who's going to be the big baddie now? It can only be Kylo Ren, because what other places do we have on the table? It ain't Benicio del Toro. So I go, this is really interesting. Now, where are we going to head with this? So my mind's already kind of trying to get a few steps ahead of the movie. And then you do see that whole, when he's trying to convince Rey after, then you go, ooh, he's really like that. He's really screwed. Like we were talking about before, when he's trying to convince her when she was with Luke on the island. Like, oh man, he's really freaking playing her. And he tries to, and of course that doesn't work out. And then later on, as the film progresses, you see him going full tilt. I'm like, this is great. He's the big baddie overall. They're going to go all the way with this. And I'm like, all right. And Driver is committing to it. He still has the performance grounded, even when he's shouting things like, blast that out of the piece of junk out of the sky. Totally working. That energy is being channeled. And as the film progresses, you also have the scene, before we get further into that, you have that scene where Finn is, he's fighting. What was that? I'm going blank on the name of that other one. That's the tall stormtrooper in silver. Oh, the actress from Game of Thrones. Right. So there's also there. I know I heard this, that people expected her to be another baddie, and to have more of a presence and be throughout all three films. But that the arc for that character, that dynamic there, kind of is resolved earlier than expected. I love Finn in that scene. Another chill I got was when he's fighting her. He's like, "Come on!" Like, as that fan, excited to see where Finn's going along this journey. Oh, that battle with her, I'm loving it. I'm loving how he's performing, through the character. He's got that energy. And again, when he says, come on, I'm all about it. And then, of course, he pulls that Back to the Future 2 move where, when you think he's fallen to, being injured or whatever, he really pops up and knocks her out. That worked. I loved it. Again, she was gone for good. Yeah, for some reason I thought maybe she might come back because you know how these films are. Because they pulled that note in the next film. Right. So I really liked where he was going, and then they have Rose and him kind of go about, going out there. Oh, you got that great scene where they're out there on that. The salt is on the ground, and it's revealing the red. When you pick that up, you see the red.
Yeah, it was like a callback to the Battle of Hoth.
Visually that was great.
Do we need to go into this too much?
No, we don't. I'm just gonna breeze through it. Yeah. And there's that dynamic between Rose and Finn, and him going to sacrifice himself.
Right.
And then she says, we fight for what we love, not what we hate. So that worked, I think, for me. Maybe not as much as it should have, but it's still like, all right, I'm rolling with it. And of course, that final battle with Luke and Kylo Ren.
Oh yeah, which is very cool.
Of course.
I have to say, I was a sucker for that, for sure.
Oh, so damn good. And then, of course, when Luke comes back and meets Leia, it's a very nice moment with the dice, all that lead. And I said to you when we saw this one was over with, I'm like, you could end the movie right there when he's just about to walk out there to face Kylo Ren. And then you pick up the movie from there with that battle. And then the next one, I'm like, that would have been perfect. Perfect note to end on. But no, they went further, and they provide us with that last battle. And that was great. Driver's bringing it. Hamill's bringing it, and of course Hamill pulls the rug out from underneath him, as we all know, and of course that leads to his death because he overuses energy. I don't know how all that works, but as a viewer, I'm like, and then he sees the two suns before he vanishes, and that's his last moment,
which was cool.
Oh, works so well, like poetry almost. And then Adam Driver's like, no, now you're giving me that full tilt. And then the movie ends slowly afterwards. And then you do have that kid, of course, picking up the broom and giving hope that it's not just the Skywalkers that have the Force. It's others, which is good. You're getting away from the Skywalker. It's not just them. It's potentially others. So I'm like, perfect, great note to end on. I'm like, what the hell? I expected to fall asleep in this movie, and then you just smacked me upside the head and you gave me something. What a huge gem this was. Not a flawless gem, but a gem nonetheless. I loved it. I think it's up there at the top 3 Star Wars movies for me.
Yeah, I mean there was a lot of interesting stuff there for sure. There was stuff that didn't work on me. There was stuff that disappointed me, but things that we discussed that were good were very good for sure. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean I've certainly my opinion on it has softened over the years. I really didn't like it in the beginning, but as you get older, I suppose you're kind of like, well, yeah, I would rather than kind of really crap on the movie, I would rather praise the stuff that I like than spend more time criticizing the stuff that I didn't like.
Well, the stuff that works, how difficult those are to pull off?
Sure.
Like I said, that there's very few movies that have got a reaction out of me like that, and I didn't think a Star Wars movie would be one of the films to do it. I mean, as Lucas said initially, these are space soap operas. Soap operas are flawed as hell. Nothing needs to be to a T. But this movie, like you're saying, going into it like as a Star Wars fan, all you got to be, are you a fan of an idea of a space soap opera? Well, then that's what you need going into it. So how did this film not fulfill that? It did that in spades. I love that this movie kind of ends on that note of Kylo Ren ending on that full tilt, going to 11, as I was hoping he'd go down that path. But then we're also familiar with the Star Wars arcs, right? You got to bring him back because we want to go back to, like what you said, stick to the familiar, right? And that's unfortunately what we have to look forward to. But yeah, I really enjoy this film. I love rewatching it. I'm going to rewatch it again before the new year. It's amazing on 4K Blu-ray. Anything more we want to say about this one?
No, I might check it out again and revisit some of the good scenes. But yeah, absolutely join it. We've got one more left, and please join us for that. And if we haven't said it before, however you're listening to these, if you have a chance, comment, give us a rating, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. And we will see you on Christmas Eve as we discuss, what's the name of that last one, Harry?
The Rise of Skywalker.
That's right. The Rise of Skywalker. We'll bounce with you then. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to not miss a single bounce.
We'll catch you next time, and don't forget to leave reviews on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you listen to Movie Bounce.